Would you be willing to share what you've heard back from your constituents, from citizens? Because now you've had some time to digest the response.
Not as much. My staff has sort of been dosing out some things to me as I've tried to, just physically recover, even though my spirit is really soaring. Sure. The gratitude from people whose voices I've elevated, who write to their senator with really personal, painful stories, to know that those people were in some ways affected by the fact that I read their letters and told their stories and talked to their pain and anger. That relieves me. I just want to make sure that I'm always respecting people who tell me about their challenges with Parkinson's or dementia or their challenges with disabled children. But to hear from Americans that feel really ignited and inspired, especially those who aren't that political or not that kind of base partisanship. That was really what I was dreaming of, is that somehow I could strike a chord that wasn't the normal left-right debates, but that in many ways could lift us beyond those to talk about a larger moral moment.
We showed some of the international reaction, which again is not how the Senate, let alone the Democrats in the minority, have been heard from over the last months. You changed that. Here's some more of the political reaction we've seen.
What Cory Booker did over the last 24 hours may have changed the course of political history, but he struck the kind of tone that grassroots Democrats are looking for.
A Democrat actually doing something. Wow. I mean, wow. That's the longest someone's held Congress captive since January 6th.
We need that kind of energy coming from the Democrats. People feel that no one is fighting for them. And when I look at Cory Booker, I feel like Cory Booker is fighting for them.
We have some sense of what moved you to do this substantively, because we got to hear you explain it. I am curious, why now? Why this moment? You did it going into those elections not knowing the outcome. You did it after some of these other court rulings. Enlighten us as to why now.
We had a terrible fight in the Senate, and I love my 46 Democratic colleagues. But it was, if you were in those caucus meetings when we were debating over what to do with the continuing resolution, everybody who stood up actually had principled, strong feelings, but we were divided against each other on what to do. And I think I felt so, I won't use the word demoralized, but pretty down after that. And then I got it from people around my state who were just fit to be tied. And that was a time that it really came together for me, that enough is enough. I've been doing a role in my caucus right now of, I believe in the people that I serve with, so I've been trying to get them to lean into social media where more and more of our voters are, and I've been proud of them. But I said I need to step out and do something. And so I was hoping I could do something that would unify our caucus and unify people who believe that the country is facing really disastrous waters right now. And so I figured this was it. And I'll have to say, I didn't know if I could last 5 hours,
Sure.
10 hours, 15 hours, but I always knew that out there, way out there, hoping it was within my reach, was the fact that a fierce segregationist was a guy that in this body, this noble body, hasn't always been right, has often been wrong, but over our history, I think the arc of our nation is bent more towards justice, but I thought it was an injustice that record was held by that segregationist.
You mentioned the segregationist Strom Thurmond. That has been part of the Senate history. If you read the Robert Caro books and the way the Senate rules were sometimes twisted to further the hand of segregation. And then, interestingly, sometimes the Senate rules allowed for progress, which is why we got, as you know, and I think viewers know, a Civil Rights Act of 64 and a Voting Rights Act of 65. He was fighting against that progress. And so I briefly want to play a little bit about him because you did break his record yesterday. Take a look.
James Strom Thurmond of South Carolina was known for one thing, race, his opposition to integration in America.
And I'll tell you, the American people from one side or the other had better wake up and oppose such a program.
He holds the all-time filibuster record in the Senate. He once talked for 24 hours straight. The subject was civil rights.
He was on the wrong side of history. Do you think some, not all perhaps, but some of what Donald Trump is doing and those who acquiesce, who are quiet, or those billionaires who once criticized him and now join him as a legal resident father is shipped away, are they on the wrong side of history?
Well, you know, you're making me emotional looking at that, because while he was in the Senate, a place that black people were never imagined to be, a brief period in Reconstruction in the 1800s, my family, my elders, were suffering at the hands of that kind of leadership. And, you know, my parents raised my brother and I in a very privileged, amazing town in New Jersey, but segregationists wouldn't let us move in. My parents had to get a white couple in 1969 to pose as my parents to put a bid on the house that was eventually accepted, and the closing came about. And, you know, my dad and mom were very clear to my brother and I, growing up in this relative privilege for two black boys, to let us know whose shoulders we stand on, who bled, who sweat, who struggled, that we could have the opportunities. And my parents, if anything they commanded my brother and I to do, was to prove worthy of all those struggles and sacrifices. So my mom, who was watching from her TV set, who did a sit-in in Charlotte, Virginia, excuse me, who told me about the indignities and the suffering of growing up in a world that men like him so viciously segregated. There was a deep satisfaction in that thread that I hold on to, that is still being held by those ancestors who fought against that. And so for me, that compelled me. I tell you, when members of the Congressional Black Caucus, who are my elders, some of them are much younger than me, but they stretched the gamut. When they started pouring into that chamber, as I got closer and closer to that segregationist record, I just felt really lifted by them. I looked into the galleries and saw so many younger people than me, and I knew that we could change history together, not just in one guy's speech, but just like all those people who brought about the Civil Rights Act, who brought about the Voting Rights Act, who brought about the Fair Housing Act of '68, that really was the law that we had on our side to buy the home we bought, that we maybe could prove worthy of those blessings collectively. And so when you bring up Donald Trump and some of the history of his family, I don't want to demonize him, because John Lewis and other marchers who stood up against the worst of the worst, they never gave in to hate. They never gave in to diminishing their character in order to aggrandize their own. But they talked about the issues. And I hope America right now doesn't get too caught up in making Donald Trump the center of their focus, because that's what he wants to be. I want people to return to the center of their focus, the people that might lose their Medicaid, the people that might lose their Social Security, the veterans right now who are being fired to this ban, who are doing noble work in their continuation of service and helping other veterans. We've got to center those people, elevate our conversation, and deepen our fight. I've learned a hard lesson as a Democrat. We've made a lot of mistakes. We've let a lot of people down, but we've got to learn. And I think what people want, as you said, they just want us. They want to know that we hurt and that we're angry, but that we're using that pain and that anger not to consume us or not to turn us into what we're against, but to use it as fuel to fight for people.
Right, and people had seen versions of this, including protests. I don't want to minimize a lot of what's been going on, but no one's catalyzed this fight who's been in the Democratic caucus or leadership like this until you this week. So when you hear the talk of, I know you, so I know how you're going to potentially be classy and pivot, but there's talk about whether you should be Senate leader for the Democrats. Are you open to that position in the future, or running for president again, while we see both the nation and part of the world say, oh, maybe this Cory Booker guy is the new face?
Well, the Senate Democrats have a leader, and he's going to remain there. I have an election. New Jersey's got two big elections. We're like Virginia. We got this November.
Yep.
And then I have my re-election in 26, and that's why I've got this big state of New Jersey. I want New Jersey to know what my focus is and my priorities are, what they elected me to do. I'm fighting for them. I'll be back in my state doing rallies and town halls this weekend around the issues. But I want to just challenge you to let you know that maybe here in the Senate, a lot of us have, of my colleagues and I watch them fight. I watch their grit. I see some of the most amazing human beings. They came out last night for me, whether it was Chris Murphy, who stood with me that entire time, was in the Senate chambers, to Tammy Duckworth, riding in a wheelchair, who lost her legs in combat, to people out there. There's a woman in Iowa named Confirst who's been leading. She became a friend of mine when I did run for president. That woman is a fighter, and America may not be paying attention to her, but she is extraordinary. I can
Well, see, I can say this because we've had these conversations over the years, Senator. This is the classy deflection I was talking about,
Right.
because that's great. That's great, substantively. But there, again, my job's to talk to you and everyone else who comes on the show. There are a lot of folks who are saying, okay, Senator Schumer, you had your run. That's great. He's invited on the program. I've had him before. But as you know, we're not going to hide the ball here. There's a lot of conversations about whether over the next few years there should be new leadership. Before I let you go, you were on this program a while back, and we got to the end of the interview. You may not remember, especially after what you've been through this week. And you said, wait, where's my lyric? And I said, well, it's such a serious day, as it sometimes is. We didn't get to one. Well, I brought you one tonight, okay?
Okay.
Mace, who you remember, Harlem World, $MA$E, on a track featuring the late, great DMX. If you had 24 hours to live, what would you do? And now I think we know the answer when it comes to you.
Wow. That's deep. Well, I want you to know, before I went out there, there's a great gospel song called Stand. And it was one of the that I used to empower myself. A lot of gospel, my brother, to stand up and to let myself know that my body was not capable of 25 hours, but I knew if I could tap into the Spirit, and I think a lot of the Spirit that binds us all together, that I could make it through. And so I'm just thankful to all the people that believed and sent me energy, and a lot of people who showed up who could, and I was able to stand.